Hello and welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Sean Kalin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faith Point Church. Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. Reverend Michelle Penix, Lighthouse Christian Church, and Reverend Harriet Akins Bamman, New Albany Centenary United Methodist Church. We begin this week with the memorial service for Charlie Kirk and the powerful moment of forgiveness made by his wife.
A stunning moment at Sunday's memorial service for Charlie Kirk as his widow Erica forgave his killer.
He wanted to save young men, just like the one who took his life. That young man. I forgive him. I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do.
Erica Kirk says she's honored to be the new CEO of Turning Point USA, the organization her husband founded. She vows to continue his legacy of embracing debate with political opponents.
The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love.
President Trump remembering his friend who helped re-elect him.
He's a martyr now for American freedom.
Trump embracing Kirk's widow as America the Beautiful rang out. Kirk tells the New York Times she had urged her husband to wear a bulletproof vest before his final campus tour. She says she now wears the pendant of St. Michael, the same one he had around his neck when he was killed. It's still marked with blood from the attack. The 5-hour service attracting tens of thousands to State Farm Stadium near Phoenix. The memorial at times resembling a church revival.
So panel, we'll turn over to you, your thoughts on that moment.
I thought that it was an amazing testimony of the gospel, because at the heart of the Christian gospel is forgiveness, that we are commanded, we are mandated, we are expected to forgive as we have been forgiven. And what an amazing testimony to be able to stand up in front of thousands of people, not including all those who were watching online, of the testimony of her faith, that even in the midst of the pain and the most difficult, trying time of her life, she could stand up there and say, I forgive the person who shot my husband. It was an amazing moment.
Yeah.
I find myself wondering, and I appreciate her witness, as you do, George, and her testimony, but I find myself wondering, what does forgiveness now look like? Does forgiveness look like reaching out to this young man in some way that's appropriate? Or does it look like being an example of living out and practicing forgiveness in a way that trickles down through the ranks of those with whom she is associated with? Mm-hmm. What I find difficult about her message was the message that followed when the president stood up and said, I hate them. And it's like, so we had this beautiful service celebrating the life of one who was taken tragically, and how awful it is so many lives have been taken since January 1 of this year by gun violence. And so I just find this a great opportunity for all of us in religious communities to think about not only offering words of forgiveness with great intention, but also practicing what that might look like and how would that shape and change us.
I appreciated was that it did verbally, and I think personally, witness to somebody who's trying to break the cycle of violence. And violence certainly is, in its most graphic and horrible form, is in that kind of physical violence. But there's also verbal violence. You know, there's lots of other ways in which we can be very violent towards other people. And through her message and her words, you know, I think she is inviting all of us to look at how do we approach people who have hurt us, disappointed us, who have done some great harm to us, whatever it might be, at whatever level that may be, but to break the cycle. And again, yes, not look for more vengeance, not look for more blood, not call for revenge, but to break that cycle. That's one of the things I certainly took away from that particular service, and her part anyway.
In my tradition, this week are considered days of awe between the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and our Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. And gaining forgiveness for us means we're all sinners. We realize we have sinned, but what we need to do, especially during this time frame, is go to the person against whom we have sinned and say, I sinned against you. I did thus and such. What can I do for you to gain your forgiveness? What behavior can I do for you so that I can feel clean going to God and saying, God, please forgive me. It's not an instant. It's a process. It's an act. And Mrs. Kirk, when I heard her, I thought this is a monumental thing that she's doing. But my thoughts also went not just to Mrs. Kirk, but to those two children. And what the rest of their lives are going to be without their father, who was obviously a strong force in their lives.
I think for me, I am pleased to know that forgiveness, like many different religions that have been brought up, is a tenet of Christian nationalism. And that she chose that opportunity to share words of forgiveness and the necessity that we all who believe must do. I personally am hoping that not only is forgiveness a strong tenet of Christian nationalism, but those other fruits of the Spirit become such that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control are all a part of what makes up their particular sect of Christianity. I don't know that sect at all, and so it was something that gave me a little bit of pause or interest to see exactly, what are the tenets of Christian nationalism that link up or follow what I believe is as a follower of Christ. But I'm glad to hear that forgiveness was a big part of that.
I think it's an invitation for all of us to look at how have we been hurt and what do we still carry within us from past hurts. Sometimes I encounter people who have had a big betrayal or something with that as a pastor, and so to try to find a way to assist them. I can't take it away for them, but I can assist them. And one of the things that I think is part of it is just trying to get it out, because sometimes we just let it fester. And like a very awful wound, it festers. At some point, it has to be lanced, it has to be cleaned out to start that healing process in a physical way. And I think, again, over my life, there certainly have been times when I've been pretty significantly hurt. I've never had a family member murdered, but certainly there have been occasions when family members have been betrayed or some serious harm has happened in their lives. And so I do have some feel for that. Not the same, but ways in which I know that not only me, but I think everybody is called, to look at what is it I need to forgive someone else for. And it's good to have that structured in, on an annual basis in a formal way, but also throughout the year. And it is throughout the year too as well, I know, in all faiths, but not to just focus in on the moment, but the ongoing effect. And there may be times when she's privately, or her kids are privately, still having to deal with that hurt and that betrayal of having someone murdered, and still figuring out, how do I still cope with this and go forward?
I think that's, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think one of the distinctions too is that we see that forgiveness is different from reconciliation, and forgiveness is different from consequences. I think you touched on an amazing aspect of forgiveness, that in the Christian faith, it's at the heart of, for instance, in the Gospel of Matthew, it's at the heart of a section that we call the Beatitudes, or the being of attitudes, right? That there is that expectation that the people of God would be a forgiving God. And we see this theme of forgiveness all throughout Scripture. And I think it just reinforces an aspect of forgiveness for us, that when we forgive someone else, like that's a win for us. Because as you said, we're not holding that inside, we're not pushing it down, we're not treating it like it never happened. Forgiveness is still a process. And yes, of course, there would be those days where, wow, it's a more difficult day than others, and just working through that and walking through that. But again, I think that powerful testimony that she made to what's at the heart of the gospel for Christians is that we forgive because we have been forgiven. And whether we see it in the Beatitudes or whether we see it on the cross of Calvary, where Jesus says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," it is at the heart of, at least for me as a Christian, what the expectation is for me, both as a pastor and as a believer, is that for me to embody that idea, that reality of forgiving my neighbor, forgiving one another, as I have been forgiven.
Well, building on that, I mean, what we in the Christian tradition call the Lord's Prayer.
Yes.
People say that all the time. There's a regular prayer in the daily life of many people and in congregational situations. Forgive us as we forgive. Forgive us our trespasses, forgive us our sins as we forgive others.
Yes.
And if we hold that back in, we're telling God something. And we say that very quick without almost like thinking about it. It's just something we.
And it's not something we say is easy,
yes.
right? It is difficult.
And can take time. It can take time. And the speed with which she was able to do that is a remarkable period of time. Very short.
She was able to put aside ego,
yes.
as we're all invited to do in this faith journey, to put aside ego so that we might be transformed and shaped in the image of God. And I appreciate her courage to take that platform and to speak those words. And I think about the model she becomes for her daughters at that moment.
Oh, huge.
To speak a word of forgiveness.
Absolutely.
Let's transition to topic 2, which is related to this, and we turn out to the debate over free speech and the fallout over the remarks made by Jimmy Kimmel.
This morning, after nearly a week off the air, Jimmy Kimmel Live is set to return to late-night TV. Disney saying in a statement, "Last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It is a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We've spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday." The show was paused indefinitely amid apparent threats from the Trump administration, following Kimmel's comments last Monday about the ideology of the alleged shooter in Charlie Kirk's murder.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Last Wednesday, Federal Communications Commission Chairman Brendan Carr, who was appointed by President Trump, seemed to threaten to take action against broadcasters that aired Kimmel's show.
I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Two of the biggest owners of network TV affiliates, Nexstar and Sinclair, said they wouldn't air the show. Then ABC suspended it indefinitely. The apparent threats from the FCC and ABC's decision to temporarily suspend Kimmel sparked a fierce national debate about free speech.
So panel, we come out to you, your thoughts on this? And the battle over free speech?
It's frightening. We have a First Amendment. It gives us free speech. That's what we used to say, and that was the end of the conversation. Now we have to add another word, presumably. Free speech means that there are going to be things said that I'm in favor of, I oppose, I embrace, I abhor. And as long as those statements that either I hear or I say do not cause harm, the old saw about screaming fire in a crowded theater, then we have the right to express them without threat of censorship. And how much the more so in the broadcasting community.
Well, I guess I can speak to the fact that this is a very difficult time, I think, in our country. And in regards to, free speech, it's even more complicated by Charlie Kirk's death and Jimmy Kimmel's words. What strikes me most is that I really think that there is so many other things to consider, so many nuances. And one of the biggest is not just that Jimmy Kimmel has his own show on television at night, but it is everything that comes after that and what we are fed through the media and largely social media. I think what I've noticed over the past several weeks is that we're not all seeing the same thing at all. And, people say, well, this has happened. I'll say, well, did you see this? And the first thing out of their mouth is, no, I didn't see that. That didn't come across. And I think that that's a real concern in this season. And I think that, I remember when something happened in the world as a child, everybody knew it. Everybody. We would go to school the next day talking about it. But that's not how it is anymore. Everybody sees their part of what happened in the world or the people they follow and how they thought about what happened in the world. And I think Jimmy Kimmel is kind of an example of that. I heard his words and thought one thing, and that was followed up by affirmation through what I was getting. But other people heard something else, and that was followed up by affirmations by what they were given. So we're in a very difficult season. I think this is a season of great discernment for those of us of faith, that we have to be in constant prayer, asking God to reveal to us what is the truth, what is the right way, how do we look at this, and more importantly, how do we help those who come to us in our congregations, who come to us in our families to make sense of everything that is going on.
It is so interesting, isn't it, how conversation has changed just in the years since we grew up. That if you disagree with somebody now, you hate them, or you hear a particular soundbite of some person, maybe taken out of context, making it say what you want it to say, which is the beauty of social media, right? Like everybody does that. And so do we really ever get the whole story? And I guess I was reminded, kind of going back to the other clip, and this one was one of the mantras that Charlie Kirk used to say, was that when we stop talking is when we move to violence. And how is it that we can get back to having conversation with one another, even if we adamantly disagree with one another, right? That we should be able to have some pretty heated debates with one another and still part in such a way that we value one another and we may totally disagree with your opinion, but we can still enter into dialogue. And that's virtually impossible today, right? And I agree that social media makes it so hard because we think that a particular person that we're listening to says all this negative stuff. or all this positive stuff. And we don't get the full story unless we make the decision to say, I'm going to go and look at the source myself and see what it says, which I think few people actually do that.
So actually what we're doing is we're choosing self-censorship.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm going to choose to get my news from a particular point of view.
Yeah.
And maybe not embrace the other side as much.
And also discretion in our words, realizing that our words have meaning. Our words have power for better or for worse.
If I can tell a quick story, I was a freshman in college, and the very first day of class, I had an intro to religion. And I was excited because not only as a believer, but my father being a pastor, I was ready for this class, just knew I was going to ace it. And I remember walking in and sitting down, taking my seat. The professor stands up and he says, how many of you all know the story of Adam and Eve? And I couldn't wait. I was like, I know all about it. And he said, you all know that's just a myth, right? And I remember just thinking my whole world had crashed, that, you know, how could this man be saying this, a myth? And I was so proud of the fact that he introduced the class that way, because it forced us to have dialogue. It forced us to communicate with one another over the course of that semester about what we believed and why we believed it. And you know, that to me is clear debate and dialogue. I think we were all on, you know, equal footing, all young kids, but our professor knew more, at least about the topic, and he was able to draw us into that debate, that dialogue, and that's so important. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't say that, you know, this was a very difficult conversation for me. When I found out what our topic was, I was like, oh my goodness. And I'll be honest, you know, many in my community, I'm sure feel the same way. It's that, you know, feeling that I and my particular group of people were not humanized under the Turning Point ministry, that, you know, I don't have, and to use his own words, brain power. There were so many comments made about Black people in context that hurt. And so this was a very difficult topic to really speak love and forgiveness around, to be honest. I had to do a lot of praying just to be able to share some of my opinions today.
I do think when you made a reference to in context, I know that was one of the early theology classes we got when we dealt with scripture passage, no matter which testament it was from, but to always see the text in its context. That we have a temptation in scriptures or anything, you pull a text out of its context and make it into a proof text. And sometimes people will do that, not only scripture, but with anything. And I do know that when I was growing up, that there was an extreme value placed on that amendment that says, you know, freedom of speech, and that speech should not be censored unless, again, you're doing something criminal, you know, or, and it is considered criminal too, I mean, you can't perjure, you know, that's a crime. You know, there's ways you can't say anything you want to say, especially if you're in that context of giving witness to something and it's simply not true, and you know that. But on the other hand, to say that just because I disagree with you, I don't like you, therefore you can't say what you're saying, and I will remove the opportunity for you to say that, that does make me uncomfortable in our present time. And now we will all, you know, self-select who we listen to. I mean, we do that. But that to say you can't listen to these people is something that I think goes against what I've grown up with and have always treasured and valued. So, and there is plenty of historical context in the past when there were attempts to do that. And they always led down a very bad path.
I was reminded with this story too that yes, the First Amendment gives us freedom of speech, but it doesn't mean that we're free of the consequences of the speech that we say, right? And so there is a sense of appropriateness and timeliness and correctness We've been talking about that a little bit. I too remember my preaching professors always saying a text without a context is simply a pretext. So make sure you do your work so that you're presenting what you're presenting in the most accurate sort of way. But I do think that this sense of reality TV and social media and all these things, the filters are off now. And maybe somehow, some way, I don't even know how it works. We need to become more aware of that and see that, yes, we can say what we want to say, but if we work for a corporation that says, yes, that was insensitive, you have to take a step back, or if something else happens, gosh, it's just such a difficult time, I think, these days to find the right words sometimes to say or not say.
I think it's also an opportunity for us to step back and look at the First Amendment and think what a gift it is. That the founding fathers and mothers of the country thought, we're going to put this as number one for a reason. It's because it wasn't there for us.
Right.
And because there is importance in hearing the voice of the people that are shaping this new place and this new community in which we live.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways we do that too, I think, is seeking input. Now, again, lots of times we're in a context where we have to be very spontaneous. But I would think what he offered that night, he was prepared in advance. I mean, it didn't just come off the cuff, I suspect. And to make sure that, for instance, when I'm writing a letter to the congregation, I write it, but I will invariably take it around to my staff and say, this is a cold read for you. You haven't had any context for this. Read this. Give me some feedback. How is this going to come across? What's this going to mean, or could mean? How do you read it? What's it mean? And so I think, again, in these kind of more public kind of context, I would encourage him in the future to say, I'm thinking about going down this path, or making these kind of comments. What do you think? What do you think? And I know, I said, I try to do that myself sometimes. Yeah.
And then we have Stephen Colbert, who is a total horse of a different color, who is receiving the same treatment that Jimmy Kimmel received, but not for anything he necessarily said or did, but it was being blamed on monetary issues. And either we have free speech or we don't have free speech. And it can't be based on a business decision. It's our First Amendment.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your great conversation. Thank you, Michelle, for your insight and your thoughts. Reverend Dr. George Watson, Faith Point Church, Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches, Rabbi Stan Miles, Little Melton School, Reverend Michelle Penix, Lighthouse Christian Church, and Reverend Harriet Akins Banman, New Albany Centenary United Methodist Church made up our panel today. Thank you very much for the great conversation. Thanks for watching Moral Side of the News. We'll see you all again next week.